Hey everybody, Ty here. Hope you all are doing well. It's been a few days since we have done a regular video on here. And I mean, the weather as of late has been slow, and I appreciate all of you that have stuck around through this slow period. And as it stands right now, I'm kind of still in the middle of it, truthfully. And I know what some of you might be thinking in case you might have missed it. Whatever happened to Invest 91L, that big conglomerate of storms that was going to end up being a hurricane or anything like that? Yeah, we need to have a little discussion about that. But as it stands right now, we aren't worried about the tropics in the Atlantic. Pacific, that's made a couple of headlines, but it's become less and less of a threat by the day here. We have Hurricane Kiko out here, which is Category 2, which is a little bit rare for the region, but not uncommon. But this is not going to make any sort of impact to Hawaii at this point. This is going to actually weaken as it gets closer and closer anyway before passing off to the north and ultimately off to the north and west of the islands. So nothing to really be worried about there, so to speak. If we look at the Atlantic once more, we can kind of see a little bit as to why we ended up having 91L completely fail, even though models were very aggressive with it in the short term. Wind shear has begun to come in a bit here. You can see it here. There's a little bit of a tropical upper tropospheric trough here. You can see the little U shape that kind of highlights that. And then further out as we get towards the west or eastern Atlantic here, you can see the wind shear really kind of ramps up at this point. And that just makes for a very inhospitable environment for tropical development of any kind at this point. If we were to go ahead and pull the Europe up here on the bottom left corner, you can see a pretty similar example to that. We put this in motion, at least in the short term, there's really not going to be a whole lot that allows these storms to develop just from the wind shear perspective alone. We haven't even talked about dry air yet, but fact in the matter is, at least in the short range for the next 5 to 10 days, I wouldn't expect much of anything to get going. Shower and thunderstorms, I would expect it, and we'll get into why that will be, but the reasoning behind the lack of development has a lot to do with partially the wind shear and the next thing that we will be talking about here, which is actually the dry air. In fact, I would go as far as to say that the dry air was the real reason as to why we didn't see much happen with 91L and why it didn't become Gabrielle at this point. So you can see that dry air has kind of poured in over into this region. You'll see it in the restart of this loop here, and there it is. That's the dry air that ended up killing 91L. And then you can still see those little puffs of dry air coming in here and there, and I think that also is going to help hinder development in the short range. By the time we get past that 10-day time frame here, we kind of level off a little bit, but we do have little bursts that pop in here and there, which could also keep things a bit complicated. A lot of this is coming from the North Africa, so the Saharan dust coming in here and then being kind of circulated by this ridge up here, which ultimately hampers development towards the main development region. As we go over towards the Caribbean, this is where the wind shear would start picking up again, also having drier over there, and it's just going to help keep things at bay at this point. There have been a few models that suggest small chances of development with frontal boundaries that come in, but I haven't really put much merit into those due to the simple fact that we haven't seen much happen from these regions in quite a while here. So let's go ahead and take a look at these ensemble models here. Some of them do want to show something a little bit more impressive popping up over here towards the main development region, but those are kind of few and far in between. They're not nearly as strong of a signal as what we've been seeing in previous weeks. By the time we get towards that 10-day range here, we do see a couple more robust signals, but all of those look like fish storms, not even a factor to land if they do even develop at all at this point. So ultimately, it looks like the tropics are going to be staying on the slower end of the spectrum here. So not really a whole lot to talk about in this one. So it seems more like an update more so than anything else if you ask me, but we're going to make sure we follow our bases here, cross our T's and dot our I's. So if we look over towards our areas of interest for future development, if we're looking at how the MJO affects everything, you can still see that we're still in an enhanced rainfall phase over here towards our main development region. But over towards the Gulf, it's a little bit drier. Caribbean is definitely dry. And then over towards the Leeward Islands and Lesser Antilles, this region is pretty active still, and it's expected to remain that way through the rest of the month. As time goes on, though, we start to dry out even over towards the main development just a little bit as we head into mid-October. So overall, I would expect a big change in regards to potential tropical activity by the time we get towards really the end of the month and really starting to see it slow down from beyond that point. As far as our development is concerned, like I said, here are some of the ensemble runs here. We still see stuff having the potential to develop based off of what we're seeing off the ensemble members off the GFS and the Euro. We have a few extra added in here, but I wouldn't be so concerned with these in regards to effects to land, or and also just in general, just chances for development. I think dry air at this point seems to be the main inhibiting factor here. And then intermittent wind shear is also not doing any favor for these areas as well. So I'm expecting a record slow season. Time's really running out. Depending on that original forecast that came out, we were expecting a slightly above average here. It's just sometimes how it goes. There's always those little unseen or unforeseen factors like this that we've been dealing with that come into play here. So that being said, while for the most part I wouldn't urge anyone to say that it's over, don't let your guard down, because if you remember 1991 with Andrew, that was the A-name storm. So that should tell you all that you need to know. But that being said, everyone, hope you have a wonderful rest of your Sunday, and I will see you in the next one. Everyone take care and have a wonderful evening.